And we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody that's tuning in within the first seconds of this pop-up webinar. Oh, just kicking things over in this right now. Great to see. Great to see you. Thank you, Iris, for joining. How's it going?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's been interesting here the last couple of days. We're in Latvia, and the fog, the smog, the mist has started settling in, which is a sign that autumn is upon us. And how do you feel about that?
Uh, to be fair, the mornings are a bit rough, especially like yesterday. At one point, when I was driving the kids to the kindergarten, I could barely see like 10, 15 meters in front of me. So that's a bit, kind of felt a bit like a horror movie in the beginning.
Well,
But
I
other
think
than
I
that,
feel
it's
like
all good.
kindergarten and school were horror movies to me anyway. But
Yeah. As soon as you get in there, man, you get the vibes.
but yeah, for those that don't know, we are streaming live on LinkedIn and also on YouTube as
Yep.
well. And we have the wonderful capabilities of being able to be completely interactive as well. And so you can comment in whichever text box that you can see. I have a question actually that I'm going to ask anybody that's watching right now and everybody that's watching right now. If you could describe yourself as an emoji this fine 20th of September, what emoji would you be? I'd love to see some emojis like popping up, and maybe we can do some psychoanalysis on them as well before we get into the nitty gritty of what we're all here for, which you can see over on this side that we'll be talking about the donut. So just comment in there an emoji of how you're feeling today. And also, you're more than welcome to ask any questions, and we will be answering them. Our Ivis will be answering them during the Q&A, which will be happening a little bit later on. So I'll wait for a few things. Hey, Madra, Leona, Alexandra, good to see you all. Appreciate that you're joining us. The reason why we're here, Ivis, is because we're actually talking about that beautiful donut chart and the capabilities and the interactions of it, which still for me is a bit of a minefield, a minefield and a minefield of getting my head around. And so I'm looking forward to also having this as an educational session for me alongside everybody else that is joining us. Abdullah, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining in. I see lots of people joining and sending emojis. What is Sandis? Is that a hedgehog?
I think so, yeah.
Nice, prickly, hedgehoggy day for him. We have the chat popping up there as well, so everybody can see what everybody's doing across YouTube and LinkedIn. We might not be able to answer all the questions, so we also have the ability for you to reach out to us at webinar@zoomcharts.com. You can also write to me directly, lee.chapman, which is my name. Hopefully you can see that, lee.chapman@zoomcharts.com. And also Ivis, I'm probably going to butcher your surname, Ivis, so I apologize that I'm not going to be able to say it live on stream right now.
It's all good, man. One of the benefits of being one of the sort of long-time employees, my email is just my name with zoomcharts.com.
There you go, Ivis@zoomcharts.com. You heard it here. We're always interacting in the office or in Teams, so yeah, I actually didn't know your email. Now I know it. There we
Yeah, I
go.
mean,
It's popped up on the
there we
screen
go.
as well. So
Now it's out
Iris,
there. Can't hide it anymore.
you're our senior product expert here at ZoomCharts. How long have you been at ZoomCharts now?
I think this year it turned 6 or 7 years. So it's been a while.
Been a while, but not long enough, right?
Yeah, one of the great things about it is you've been through a lot of iterations, through a lot of hurdles that we've come across eventually.
Yeah.
We started off in Power BI almost at the very beginning of Power BI itself. So whenever we came into the marketplace was a completely different playing ground, let's just saying like that. Custom visuals was more of a taboo thing, right? Because
Right.
everybody was kind of scared. You didn't have a lot of security certification or anything like that. The only way on how you could get custom visuals were basically if they were paid is you had to only go to the supplier's webpage, download them, have a separate PBI viz file, which is not available on the app stores. So it was a completely different playing ground. It's more mainstream now. A lot of things have been sorted out, but let me tell you, there's a lot of battles that the custom visual developers do behind the scenes with the Power BI team to figure things out, to make things work. So yeah, a lot of work has been put into it.
And you've been on the front lines of the change of the
Yeah.
disruption in the markets, which is wonderful. And we're of course going to be talking about one of those custom visuals today, the donut, which is one of our more popular visuals. But of course, you can just plop up a donut chart in your Power BI, but there is so much under the hood that you'll be talking about in this session, right?
hmm Yeah. So I'm gonna briefly just quickly showcase to everyone that what visuals we currently have, just so you have the list in front of you and know what's off on what's out there. And then we're gonna focus on today specifically more on the donut chart. So how do you actually work with it? What interactions do you use? How do you make the most of even a simple visual like a donut chart, right? Because at first it might seem like, well, it's a donut. What do you want with it? Well, there's few things that we have kind of catered to and made sure that it's not only easy to create the chart, but it's also easily to navigate the chart to kind of create a little bit different way of interacting. Because one thing that we're seeing nowadays is a lot more companies are kind of gravitating towards more interactive reports.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
previously, I think you've seen this from customers as well, right? When we started off, or a couple of years ago, the typical report was basically something you prepare for a PowerPoint presentation afterwards, a PDF document. So those were always snapshots of things.
yeah.
What people are doing nowadays is creating reports that allow you not only to create those snapshots but actually answer things on the fly. So when you're in a meeting, you can actually just interact with one visual or the other visual to filter things out, to look through things, and you don't have to go back and say, I'll get back to you on that question, so give me a day, I'm going to go through the day to make sure I create a new presentation slide and everything like that.
And then
So
after that as well, we hear horror stories about clients who go through that and developers that go through that, and then they
yeah.
send out the manager-wide report, but the managers are doing something else, and that report doesn't get seen until the following week, and the data is irrelevant. And so we're actually seeing, thanks to ZoomCharts and custom Power BI visuals in general, that, as you said, reporting on the fly is democratizing and leveling the playing field of who can be an analyst today, and you can own that within your company as well. So, well, I would love for you to go into the nitty gritty of the donut chart in this one, and I think you're going to be sharing your screen.
Yep.
Clicking through a few things. And as Ivis, everybody is going through this, I'm sure you're going to have some questions. So just to say once more for those that maybe have just joined a little bit later, please feel free to be commenting in the chats on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And during the Q&A, we'll be answering those questions as much as we can. If not, we'll be hopefully hearing from you at webinar@zoomcharts.com. So Ivis, take it away.
All right, perfect. So yeah, like I said, one thing first would before we go into the donut chart, just quickly covering what visuals we do have currently available. So currently we do have 10 visuals that are on the app stores, and there's one visual which is the scatter plot visual. So this visual is currently undergoing the last changes before we submit it to the app stores and becomes publicly available. Right
Woo.
now, it's currently available only on the website as a beta version. So there are some kinks that we're still ironing out, right? Making sure that it's the best possible shape that it currently
Mhm.
could be. There's also a lot of features that were already gathered from the users. So one of the things that is basically something that I usually say within every single training session or within every meeting with customers, if you guys see something that you think could be beneficial for us to improve within the visual, just let us know about it. It's a
Of
lot
course.
better that you tell us this than rather we're going through the backlog of hundreds of features and be thinking like, maybe add this, no, 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 okay, we could try this one, right? We're trying to create visuals which are customer driven in a sense that we're providing the things that you are looking for. So
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's as you said. I mean, we're a data-driven company as well, but we're customer-centric at the end
yeah,
of the day because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the customers and the feedback. So we truly value it. If you want to give any feedback during the presentation as well, not just questions, please feel free. Have a chat with each other as well, because why
yep,
not? We're on LinkedIn. We're all about connecting. not only data but connecting people as well. That's so cheesy, but
It is
but
what it is.
it's so true. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much, Ivis. I'll be sticking around. I'm gonna be here humming along, and if anything goes wrong, Ivis, you know what I'm gonna be doing.
Yeah, covering me.
And interrupting. Okay, I see the donut on the screen, so please take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man. Yeah, one more thing before I start off is the sample report that you see me having right here in the background. It's the same sample report that you can actually download in the app stores. So if you go to the app stores and you find, for example, the Drill Down Donor Pro, right here you can download the sample. And we have these samples for every single one of our visuals. The main idea about these samples is it's just another way on how we can provide information for you. So you can see we have different pages where we talk about different features, different interactions, and so forth. So that's always a good material to have at hand because it allows you to kind of play around with the visual prior to setting it up for your own data. So that's something to keep in mind. But right, enough about that. Let's talk about the donut visual in specific and what are some of the interaction options. So, in order to make the visual a little bit more humanized, let's just say like that, right? What we're trying to do is create a visual that allows you to drive the story directly through the visual rather than those external controls or anything like that. So, for example, if you wanted to create a drill down donut chart, what you have to do is just make sure that in the category list you have at least two categories, meaning that you have at least two levels within the information, and you also have a value. The tooltip content is something that allows you to add extra information within the tooltip if it's needed. In this case, we have three different levels. And one of the things that we do here is if you click, for example, on one of the slices, okay, let's choose Australia. If I click on it, you can see I drill down to the second layer. If I choose product as my second category, you can see I create those inner layers. So what the chart is essentially doing is it's allowing you to create a story-based drill down, meaning that you can still follow what the audience, not the audience, but the presenter, for example, has selected based on the visible donut chart in front of you, because it showcases you the color, the size, the position of the slice that you have previously selected. And let's be honest, right? Nowadays, the attention span is just getting smaller and smaller, and people are more easily distracted. You get an email, you get a Teams message, you get a notification from somewhere. So you sometimes miss things. And this is one way on account you can still keep your audience captivated in a sense, so they can follow through and make sure that they're looking at exactly the same thing. So the drill down is activated by just clicking on one of the slices, or if you're also using a touch driven device like a phone or a tablet or a touch screen with a laptop, you can also simply just tap on one of the slices. It's the same interaction across the board. So it's a lot more intuitive than activating the drill down buttons and so forth. So that's one of the things. If you want to go back, there are a few options how you can do that. You can click on the center of the donut chart, and each single click is going to be one level up in the hierarchy. So you're essentially following up the hierarchy that you had previously selected. Now, if I do the same two drill downs, so I do it here, I do the drill down for a product, you can see I'm on the third level. Let's say I wanted to quickly get back to the top view. For that, I can actually use from the formatting options and the toolbar, there's a button called reset. So the reset button allows you to showcase to the user that this visual is actively passing out a filter, and by clicking on it, I revert back to the very initial state of it. So that's the starting position. And the cool thing about this is that it not only has a purpose of basically clearing out the filters and resetting the visual, it's also a visual clue to your end users that this visual is filtering something. Because, for example, right now, you can see I haven't selected anything, so there's no reset button right here in the top left. As soon as I select one of the categories, you can see a reset button appears. So that's one of the cool things about the reset button itself. The other benefit is I'm sure most of you already have some sort of a master clear filters button within your report that just allows you to clear every single filter. The reset is on per visual basis. So the more visuals you have, the more dynamic sort of filtering and clear out of the filters is available to you as an end user. So that's just something you can also keep in mind. So a click is a drill down. Click on the middle part of the donut chart is a drill up. Now, let's say what happens if you wanted to select Australia, but you didn't want to drill down into it. You have two different options in how you can do that again. You can either do a long press. You can see that calls out the slice and filters out, of course, the data for the selected slice. Or alternatively, you can do the same action by holding Control and left clicking. So for example, if I clear the selection, now I'm holding down Control, clicking on a slice, it creates a selection. But the benefit of using a Control button, for example, is that it allows me to select multiple slices. So this allows you to select those slices without drilling down and essentially filtering out the sort of parent categories of the hierarchy and look what's underneath them. Now, when it comes to selection, there's actually a new interaction that we just recently introduced into the donut chart. It went live with the previous release, so it was kind of hidden a little bit, let's say like that, because we were still testing it out, getting some initial feedback from some of the customers who knew about it. But the cool new interaction that we have introduced is a reverse selection. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is, for example, select these two slices, and in order to create or essentially enable the reverse selection, the way and how you do it is you do a triple left click on one of the already selected slices. So 1, 2, 3, and you can see it deselected these and selected the other three slices that were available. So that essentially is a new way on how you can very quickly select one of the primary filters and then afterwards basically create an exclude filter for those selected categories. Now, like I said, we already had this running for one version now. We had some customers test it out, give us their feedback. And one of the things that we already know that we're going to be improving going further on is right now, when you do this selection, and if I do a reverse selection, you can see that the other slice is not getting selected because that's essentially something synthetic that we create on top of the visual. So currently, that category or that subsegment is getting a completely separate group, which is not getting affected by those selections. So going forward, one of the things that we're also going to be implementing is the possibility of defining whether or not you want to exclude or include that others group into that selection or deselection. So that's something new that we're also going to be introducing later on. I don't know exactly when this is going to be happening. There are a few sort of tricks or hurdles that we have to come jump around to make sure that things work exactly like you need them to work. But just know that things like this is also going to be coming to you as an option for the donut chart. Currently, you kind of have to choose between what's visible. So for example, if I would disable the others and select, let's say, these two slices, do a triple click, you can see I select everything, but as soon as I have the others enabled, that's where I'm only going to be selecting or playing around with the visible slices. The others is sitting on a separate scale, basically. So that's one of the things. What else? One of the things that I also usually encourage people to do or take a look at is under the formatting options, you have this tab called Advanced Settings. Oh, sorry, not Advanced Settings, but Uses Filter. And you can see there's just one single, basically a drop down, and you can enable or disable the property tab itself. So what happens with this is if you disable uses filter, this means that you still have a donut chart, but any selection, anything you do within it is not passing out any filters. Because you can see right here, nothing is getting filtered. As soon as I enable it, that's gonna reset itself. And then I can again select the slices and you can see this is affecting the final selection or the results in the rest of the dashboard. The other thing is this one, remember selection. And this is particularly meant for when you're creating bookmarks. So if you want to save a particular state that the current donut chart is in, whether it's a drill down, whether it's a selection, you can utilize the bookmarks. Just make sure that you always also enable this one because the primary reason for this is to remember that particular selection, right? So keep that in mind when you're playing around with different bookmarks, different selections, clearing of the bookmarks, and so forth. So that's something you can also take into account. What else? The previous and others. So by default, what you're going to see in some of the cases, if you don't have a lot of slices, is a donut chart like this. So the others itself is not going to be visible. In order to activate it, you need to make sure that you go into the formatting options and open up either donut or pie section, depending on which visual you are using, that the others itself is enabled. That's the most important part. And the second one is to define the number of slices. So for example, right now I have defined it as 5. What you are essentially doing here is you're defining the number of slices before the rest of them gets grouped into the others. So you're essentially defining the top n. So for example, if I say that I only want to see the top 3 slices, which I input right here, then I create the others segment. And the cool thing about the others is that if you click on it, it's actually an interactive one. So it opens up the next three contributors. And once you go into the others, another synthetic slice is being created called previous. So this is something that the chart does automatically for you. Now, one thing that you can notice here, and this is one of sort of like a brain teasers or twisters in some cases, is that if you look at the size of the slice, for example, right here, previous, you can see it's supposed to be almost 64%. Visually, that's definitely not 64%. So what we're doing here is by default, we're using a relative scale for the slices. The reason why we're doing this is because it gives you a possibility or a chance to relatively compare the slices when you're looking at also the small segments. Because right now, for example, you can see it's 1.37, 4.5. So it's a lot easier for me to kind of create a comparison between these slices without the actual size of things. Now, of course, if your users say that, hey, it's an interesting feature, but it's very confusing for us, we just want to see the actual sizes and the appropriate numbers and everything. So it's quite easy to do. Again, go into the formatting options, scroll down, find the donut tab or the pie tab, whichever visual you're using. Scroll down and find this property right here called others and previous sizing. And what you want to do here is switch from default to actual. So the difference now is going to be that whenever I open up the others, instead of rescaling everything, I'm essentially moving around the donut chart in those particular segments, and I'm keeping all the sizes and their actual values. So these are just two different ways on how you can navigate through the chart to make sure that the end user experience is a lot more intuitive. So whatever you do, just make sure you play around with both of them, because some users are going to like one option, other users are going to like the other one. So just make sure that they know what they're getting into and they understand how to utilize the chart. What else? Two new toggles that we introduced that which are also kind of related to interactions are going to be these two. So auto drill into single slices and exclude blank categories. Now, auto drill into single slices is built for a very specific use case, and that is when you're using a drill through functionality. So essentially, if you're having the same donut chart both in the source page and in the drill through page, what this toggle is going to be saying to the visual that's in the drill through page is that if I selected a particular category and I went to the drill through page, it's going to automatically drill down to the next layer, because there's no reason for you to showcase just a single slice because you already know how you got there in a sense. So that's going to do the automatic drill down to showcase a bit more information. So that's something you can always try out. And the other one is exclude blank categories. Now, the reason why we implemented this one is because, of course, you could do this, right? You could go into the filter panel, open up, for example, the first one for us is region. I could open up the regions column. I don't have any blanks, but let's just assume I had blanks. What I would do is select all, deselect blank, just making sure that I don't have any blanks. And I have to do this basically for every single level of the hierarchy because I have to manually exclude those. Now, with this toggle, what happens is the chart is going to do that for you. So if you have a situation where some of the data is not fully classified, if you don't want to sort of see those slices and all the levels of the drill down, you want to physically exclude them, you can easily do this by just enabling exclude blank categories. One other interesting use case for this would be if you have, let's say, if you're using a field parameter and you're switching between different values. You can also do this to make the chart in some cases have a drill down or not have a drill down. Because if you don't have any values underneath a particular category, since there's not going to be also a blank one, you're not going to have a drill down there anymore. Whereas the other option might have additional drill down levels. So that's something you can play around and also achieve very interesting results. But yeah, regarding the other features, we talked about how to select a slice, how to drill down. We talked about how to get up a single level. We talked about the reset button and all those filters. The only other few things that were last two things that I would probably mention is if you think again that we think this is intuitive, right? But it's not like our opinion is the only opinion out there. If you know your users and they just feel kind of uncomfortable by clicking on the middle part of the donut chart to get back to the previous level, of course you can go into the toolbar tab and say, hey, I also want to enable a zoom out button, which is going to be exactly the same action, but there's going to be a physical item right here which they can click and zoom out level by level. So again, just make sure that the chart feels intuitive for the end user. That's the main idea here. And the other thing is, if you have legends enabled, so I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to have the legends, I want to have them at the bottom row, and I want to have them centered. So one of the things that happens with the legend items is if you click on it, it's actually also going to do a drill down. So there are just different ways on how you can interact with a simple donut chart, right? Multiple ways of drill down, selection, going back up, resetting everything. And if you get lost, like I said, there's always a reset button that allows you to quickly get back to the top. So when it comes to these interactions, I'd say these are the ones you need to know about. Sure, eventually we might come up with new ones, or you guys can suggest new interaction options which you think are missing. But I'd say we pretty much have covered the most important ones. Now, if you have anything else, then you think that we should definitely have it, like I said, make sure you let us know about it. Send us some screenshots, some GIFs, some samples that you've built with, I don't know, with other BI tools or something you've seen in other BI tools and just kind of want to implement also in Power BI eventually. Send us those sort of screenshots, GIFs, anything that helps us to understand what exactly you're trying to do there and what's actually the use case for that. Because it helps us to understand, okay, how do we actually fine tune it to make sure that it does the job, not just kind of covers the idea. But yeah, that will be it regarding interactions.
Amazing. Well, there's so much going on with the interactions, and I can imagine from a developer point of view that there's a lot going on under the hood. And there's actually a really good question that came through about what size data sets are we able to work with in the with the donut. I can imagine it was looking super smoothly
Mhm.
with a I don't know how big that data set was, but relatively small. But how vast can we go with the data and having a smooth reporting experience for any user?
So when it comes to the data size, it's kind of hard to define exactly the number of rows that you can have within the donut chart, right? Because there are multiple things you need to take into consideration. One of them is the granularity of the data itself. So one of the key points of a donut chart, which you kind of have to remember, is a donut chart is not supposed to be a good visual to showcase hundreds of different categories. It's just not meant for these type of use
Right.
cases. Even if you have the other slice, the visual still has to calculate and understand, okay, where exactly are those 200 other additional slices going to be showcased? If you show all of them, well, it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a lot of like individual categories, you're still working with a relatively small amount of categories, which the donut chart is meant for. You can go into hundred thousands or millions of rows. That's going to be fine. The donut chart is not going to have any issues with that. When it comes to the depth of the data, the donut chart currently supports down to 9 levels of drill down. And I can
To
clearly
nine.
say to you that I've seen only 2 use cases so far throughout these 7 years where somebody has used all 7 of them, or sorry, all 9 of them. The
That was
main,
actually another question that
yeah.
came through about like hierarchy levels as well. And what does it look like actually? Is how can you actually do you have nine levels
Let's see.
of
So
layers?
department, region, title. What we could also
Just
have here.
because, just to kill some time.
Let's just have just random information, some coordinates, some dates. Let's just kind of go crazy with it. So we go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, now it's going to be not so interesting because those are going to be single values, but you can
Right.
essentially see I can keep going up those 9 levels at the very end,
Yeah.
and then it's selected. The reason why I usually don't recommend to use all 9 of them, even though you have the possibility, of course, is because you don't want your users to also get stuck in so-called set funnels. What I mean by this is, in some cases, this is what you want, right? You want them to kind of always follow a particular path.
Yeah.
But in some cases, it's a lot better that instead of having just a single donut chart, we could actually play around with this one right here, right? So let's say I have regions and departments, even though I just would have 2 levels. So if I have one visual right here, let's resize it to about here. Let's make a copy of it. Okay. let's just say this one's not going to have the region, this one's not going to have the department. So we don't have a drill down now, but it's the same idea. I could
Hmm.
have this as a single visual, but that means that I have to always, first of all, check the region, and then I'm going to have the department level sort of structure separated for me. But in some cases, you might also want to have the possibility to cross filter information from both ways.
Right.
And in this case, for example, okay, I actually don't care about the region so much. I actually want to see how the development department is being segregated into the regions. So don't always try to kind of push everything into one visual just because it can. Think about the use case and what would be the best approach for the end user. Which one makes more sense?
Well, exactly, and it goes back to about back to what you were saying about design. Oh, we're popping up, we're popping around. Actually, another question just came in right now.
Yep.
Actually, so we probably want to have Power BI back up, but when it comes to the actual donut design itself, can you adjust the radius of the inner and outer circles
Yeah.
or circles?
So for the donut chart itself, if we could get the screen share back, there we go. So if we go into the formatting options and if you go under the donut section or the pie, depending on the visual, there's going to be one small little difference. The donut chart is going to have this property called inner radius. A pie chart, of course, is not going to have it because, well, it's a pie chart. You're not supposed to
Yeah,
adapt the inner radius for it. But the interesting thing is that you can actually still make a donut chart into a pie chart, but you can't make a pie chart into a donut chart.
got it. I think.
So the main reason why you would want to play around with the inner radius itself is one of them is purely cosmetic, just to kind of feel that, let's say you don't like the look of the pie chart. I actually like to have it something around 60% because it represents a donut chart a little bit better and it just looks visually more clear to me. The other thing is what it affects is the size of those inner circles or the inner reference layers. So for example, if we
Uh,
put it back on something like 20%, there we go. And if I do a drill down, you can see that that's the size that it's allowed to take away from the chart. Sure, eventually, if I add more levels, it's going to extend, but
mhm.
that's the width basically of how much I'm allowing it to go for.
Yeah,
Whereas if you make it something like 60%, it's just a lot easier for the user to kind of see and understand what's happening there. You're reserving a lot more space for it. And when it comes to the auto radius, this defines how much of the chart container you're giving to the donut chart itself. And one of the most important things here is you have to be cautious when you're playing around with these because this defines how much the donut can take. It doesn't mean that it takes into account all the labels and everything. So, for example, if you're playing around with a situation where you don't have labels, you could, of course, go the whole 9 yards and go to 100%. But right now, for example, if I increase this to 100, you can see that it's trying to squeeze everything in. But if
hmm,
you're going to have prolonged names, you might come across situations where some of these are starting to overlap because you're physically telling it, use everything you got.
yeah,
So
yeah.
be
Especially if you've got
cautious with
multiple
that.
slices as well.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you have a lot of slices. So great, right? These you can't really tell which one is which because, well, the donor chart is taking 100%. That's why you just always play around with these and try to see, okay, which one suits better, which one fits better. If I have the others, if I don't have the others, what happens if I play around with different label settings? We do also have two different placement modes. One of them is align, which basically tries to follow more of a table structure. So there's always going to be rows and columns essentially in the background. And there's the other one called wrapping. So wrapping is just a more space efficient option.
Yeah,
Both of them have their own use cases, so just make sure you play around with the options. As much as I would love to tell you that, everything you do is going to be working just straight out of the box, sometimes no, sometimes you do have to play around with them. But
yeah,
that's sort of the trade-off you give for function sort of ability to customize things. Not every single time everything is just going to be working as you expect straight away because there's a lot of variables that needs to be taken into account.
definitely. And you mentioned the donut and the pie,
Yeah,
but there is also there is pin and there is the filter as well. I was wondering, like maybe you can just share your opinions on where those should be. Um, what cases you would use those in? Because
sure.
I guess a
So
lot of people might not know that there is a pin option for our visuals.
Yeah, especially for those who have been using the visuals for a little bit longer time, right? For them, it's like, what is this new one which looks just slightly different, but kind of looks exactly the same?
Mhm.
So the main difference between these two visuals is that as a custom visual developer, we do have to define on a code level what is going to be the main capability of a visual. And for visuals that are in Power BI, there are two main capabilities. It's either filtering or highlighting. That's what happens with your data essentially. So the Pro with the red Pro icon is the one that uses filtering. And that's the one we usually recommend to do because cross chart filtering is an amazing capability.
Yeah.
The other pin version supports highlighting. So highlighting is an option where instead of filtering out the data, you actually just highlight the portion of the data of how much you're actually taking away, which is good in some cases. But the reason why this is called a pin visual and not, for example, a highlight visual, right, is because one of the core differences between these two visuals is that Power BI, when you're building reports and services and when you're creating dashboards, allows you to pin visuals to a dashboard. The way on how currently the dashboard works is you cannot pin a visual that uses filtering. You can only pin a visual that uses highlighting. So that's why we have those two separate versions. So if you are going to build, for example, a report and pin a donut chart to a dashboard, make sure you're using a pin version of the visual. Alternatively, if you just want to go through what I just said once more with examples that are already available to you, you can also go right here into our website. So let's just go and showcase you where to go, showcase the full path, go to resources, documentation,
Hmm.
and one of the pages right here is going to be the pin versus the filter option. Right here, we explain the same thing quickly in text, have a couple of GIFs to kind of showcase it, and of course, we have a video for it as well.
Oh, you're
So
there.
I'm everywhere, man.
Exactly, exactly.
So there are multiple ways on how we try to provide information to the users. There's information in documentation, there's videos on YouTube. You can always reach out to us and ask these questions. So there are multiple ways on how you can get the information. But the main idea is pin visuals are primarily built for the use case when you are going to be pinning them to a dashboard,
Yeah,
whereas filtering visuals are meant more for interactive uses.
exactly. And one thing that you mentioned earlier on towards the start is kind of like at the inception of ZoomCharts and Power BI in general, which is it 10 years this year?
For ZoomCharts, yeah, I think so. Yeah. So you can imagine, right? 10 years in the business as such, and 7 years within Power BI.
Exactly, and you mentioned like there was obviously not obviously, but there was obviously some skepticism when it came to Power BI because you didn't have the certifications and things like that. Maybe just for those that may not know, maybe those that do have it in their mind, maybe you could just mention something along the lines of how we deal with data security, because of course we're dealing with high profile clients around the world. Obviously, we can't mention every single name, but maybe you can just talk about how we handle data. What does it mean for their security and
Mhm.
privacy?
Sure. So the way we handle data is pretty simple in a sense that we don't touch your data. That's one of the first things you need to understand. The visuals are there just purely as a visual component. Then what ensures you that we're doing this? It's not just my word, right? Because I could be telling anything and every time I wanted. But if you go, for example, into an app source, or if you open up in the Power BI and right here, let's just find, for example, the same Donut Pro, you can see these little blue check marks. If you open it up, there's also going to be a yellow check mark. So it changes colors eventually as well. So there's Power BI certified. And if you click on it, it actually takes you to a Power BI documentation side. So what this page explains to you is what it means to be security certified by Power BI. In simple terms, basically what it means is that Power BI from their side has security checked the visuals to make sure that we're not accessing any third party API calls, we're not collecting any of the data, we're not transferring any of the data. The data is aggregated and worked on purely by Power BI itself. The visuals are there just to visualize what you add into them. Because if you
Mhm.
think about it, right, in a report itself, you might have multiple pages or multiple tables. We have no idea what you have here. What the visual can only do is work with the data that you provide for it.
Yeah,
But it's again going to be worked only within Power BI environment. Nothing is being sent out.
exactly. That answers the question, but it also becomes a need as well. So how can you grow a business without, ironically, data? And that's quite simply answered because I'm in the customer success team and sales as well, and I think that's one of the true benefits of ZoomCharts in general when you decide to purchase our visuals is that it's not just Iris and I having
Yeah.
chats like this. It's not just developers sitting in a corner, but we actually have like a full blown support team, 24/7 support, right? Frontline support.
Yep. We
But
do have a 24/7 support for tier 1 questions. So when it's something that can be easily answered either from documentation or something that tier 1 is going to be handling that and they're going to be doing an amazing job with that.
Mhm.
Whenever it becomes a more technical situation where, more in-depth knowledge needs to be added or more comments or calls, something separately needs to be discussed, then tier 2 support is getting involved.
Right.
And tier 2 support usually answers within one business day.
Fantastic. And of course, we have this customer success team as well.
Yep.
And that is truly about building successful data teams within companies, whether they're large or whether they're small as well. So not only do you come with these fantastic interactive visuals, but it comes with a whole package of full-blown support and continuous support forevermore. But not only that as well is that we've been working with a lot of companies recently to refactor and redesign their Power BI reports as well. We understand that when it comes to, as you mentioned at the start, these reports are suddenly just there. There is a demand. They have to like work on it, and then they deliver it, and then the time has already passed, or the manager doesn't receive something. And what we're not only doing with the custom visualizations themselves, but we're building more intuitive and re- and reports with clarity for many, many businesses around the world, multiple industries as well. And if that is something that you are interested in as well, you can reach out to me directly and we can have a 15, 20-minute chat and we won't be going over your data as such, but we'll just go over, where you see Power BI growing within your company. And then we can look at packages, not only in our visuals, but also as a service that we provide to be able for you to reach those goals. Yeah, and there's again my face and my name and and my email address as well, lee.chapman@zoomcharts.com. I think we've answered all the questions that have come in. If anybody has joined in the middle of this and didn't hear that you can interact with us, then you can, by all means, write in the comments right now. We'd love to see you just pop up anyway and give us an emoji of how you're feeling. I'm probably going to see a lot of donuts now. Popping up. I mean, I'm super hungry as well. There's the funny thing talking about donuts and pies. I'm like, okay, it's now nearly 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
It ain't easy, guys. It ain't easy.
Easy. But yeah, but please do feel free to reach out to me. You can add me also directly on LinkedIn. I actually appreciate that from the last webinar that we did, that a few people did connect with me, and we had some really, really great chats. So these are incredibly useful and productive, not only for us to be able to educate, our clients and also the industry itself, but as we said, we just love to connect people and not just data. And so, yeah, please add me on LinkedIn. You can email me directly there. If you've got any questions as well, ivis@zoomcharts.com or webinars@zoomcharts.com. You have multiple options to stay connected with us. And if you haven't done so already, you can start some free trials. You can reach out to our sales department as well. Many options for you to just get involved, and we'll be handling you all the way through, ensuring that you make the most out of your Power BI reports. Ivis, I'm starting to feel hungry. How are you feeling? How are you holding up?
About to eat. About to order some donuts, I think, at this point.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I think I'll be doing the same. But thank you so much for everybody for joining us across LinkedIn and on YouTube as well. I think we should be doing this again, Iris, and I hope to see everybody.
Absolutely.
I hope to see everybody and more. Invite your network as well to the next one. But for now, Iris, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me. All right, guys. Have an amazing day.
Yeah, take care. Have a great weekend.